Hello and welcome. I'm Nick
I'm Jackson.
from Top Notch Sports. And today, this is the current state of the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers were 8-9 in the 2022 NFL season and ultimately did not make the playoffs. They finished third in the NFC North. After a season last year that did not go as planned, they move on officially with Jordan Love, who they deem as possibly their franchise quarterback going forward. Can Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers ultimately make a push and make the playoffs is the main question this season? They're currently 2-3. So this is the current state of the Green Bay Packers. Right now, the Green Bay Packers are 2-3, and they have 12 games remaining on their season. Jackson starting off 2-3, looking at this schedule with a bye week at week 6. How are we feeling with Denver and every other game going forward on this schedule with 12 games remaining? What are you thinking?
Yeah, look, I think they're getting their bye in a very good time in their season after suffering a tough loss against the Raiders in Vegas and then a loss against Detroit at home as well. And so they're coming off their bye and they're going to go play the Denver Broncos, which, they're kind of having a really rough season. Russell Wilson not looking too good. That team not looking good. They're trading all their defensive pieces. So it looks like they're going to probably be able to come off their bye and should be able to get a win. We'll see what the model says about that in a couple slides. And then they're going to go play the Vikings, who they're in a deep hole right now without Justin Jefferson, and they're going to play that game at home as well. So it looks like they're going to have two pretty favorable matchups, at least in my opinion, coming off the bye, which I think is very important to revive their season a little bit, get out of that 2-3 hole they dug themselves in. And then they play a couple tough games with the Rams, and then the Steelers are always a tough team, and then the Chargers are always very talented. And then they go play the Lions, the Chiefs, and then they kind of cool off with the Giants. So they're going to have some tough games coming up down the stretch going into November and December. We'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the first 5 games too, 2-3, but it's a very odd 2-3. You beat Chicago, which is a good win. You lose to Atlanta, which is a game I feel like they should have won. You beat New Orleans, which they were down 17-0, and then Carr got hurt. But again, that's a game I would have marked as an L to start the season, but they ultimately win that game. Then you lose to Detroit, which is understandable. And then you lose to the Las Vegas Raiders, which again is a game that I would have honestly marked down as a win. So looking at this, I mean, I feel like they lost 2 winnable games in Atlanta and Las Vegas. And they ultimately pull a game against the New Orleans Saints that I felt like they would have ultimately lost. And again, with Carr going down, it kind of makes a little bit of sense, but they dug themselves out of a 17-0 hole and won that game. So at the 2-3 record that they're at, they've showed that they can compete with really good teams, but then they also lose to some teams that I don't feel like they should be losing to. So this is a really inconsistent Green Bay Packers team, and we'll see how we have them going, finishing the season. But we'll also look at our model that Noah the Hubie Man Thompson has made for us, and we'll see what his model projects. So let's see what we got here. All right, here we go. Here's a depth chart for the Green Bay Packers. And you look at this team, it's a mixture of youth and veteran leadership. You look at the offense, you got a lot of young pieces. Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, Christian Watson, A.J. Dillon's a little bit of a younger guy, probably in his mid-20s. Aaron Jones is older, right? He's that old vet that you can, he can run, he can catch, he can do a little bit of everything you want. Offensive line's pretty dang good. I mean, for the most part, you got, again, a lot of young guys there. Rasheed Walker's a guy that I was not a fan of coming out of the draft. Don't know how he's been doing for the Packers, but again, I was not a huge fan of him coming out. John Runyon, Josh Myers in the interior. The defense is where you got a lot of veterans, okay? And you still got a lot of young guys there, too. A stud like Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, 2 pretty young guys locking up the interior. Kenny Clark, a little bit more of a vet with Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary coming off the edge. Quay Walker, really young. Devondre Campbell, again, one of those really solid pieces for this team. Corners, Rasul Douglas, Jair Alexander. Alexander is one of the top corners in the league. Rudy Ford and Darnell Savage locking down the deep part of the field for this Green Bay Packers defense. Jackson, when you look at this team, you got a mixture of young, you got a mixture of old. This team right now, 2-3, trying to make a playoff push. How do you feel about this roster for this season and going forward?
Yeah, for this season, look, I really love what the defense is looking like, at least on paper. defensively, this team should be really solid. And like you said, all the veterans, at least, a lot of the veterans are on the defensive side of the ball. You got Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary's, a veteran now. Devondre Campbell, Rasul Douglas, Jerry Alexander, all the veterans are on the defensive side of the ball, which I think is really going to, help out this Packers team in the long run because those guys are going to be able to hold it down. They know what it takes, win a dogfight. And then you go to the offense, very young, Jordan Love, first year as a starting quarterback, Christian Watson, second year receiver, which the Packers and the Packers fans got high hopes for. They got Luke Musgrave, rookie tight end, Jaden Reed, another rookie receiver. So, like you said, a lot of young and old on this team, which I think for the future is going to be good for the offensive side. And maybe on the defensive side in the future is going to, not be good as much with all the vets. But for right now, I think they're in a good spot.
Very young team, possibly have playoff aspirations this season. But even if they don't, I mean, this offense is really young. They got a lot of pieces. And that defense, too, with Quay Walker, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, and Jair Alexander, and even Darnell Savage. Really, really good, solid pieces. And they still got $7.7 million in cap space this year if they want to make a move, which they're probably not going to. You know what I mean? Just let it be what it is this year. But going forward, I mean, I don't know what the cap space is next year. But again, if you're a Packers fan, be sure to stay tuned because we got a salary cap review video coming up at the end of this season. So stay tuned. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe. Let's keep this video pushing. So right now, they are currently 2-3. Okay, so let's move on here and look at our favorable, unfavorable, and toss-up games going forward this season. Our model projects, the Top Notch Sports model projects 4 favorable games going forward, 2 unfavorable games going forward, and 6 toss-up games going forward. So, Jackson, when you look at this, 4 favorable, 6 toss-ups, and 2 unfavorable games, you got to look at it like this again, right? Those 6 toss-up games very well could swing this season in the right or wrong direction. If you win more than half of those, you're looking pretty good. If you lose more than half of those, it could end up being another missed playoff year for Matt LaFleur. So, I mean, when you look at this, how are you feeling for this Packers team that's 2-3 right now?
Yeah, look, if I'm a Packers fan watching this video, I see the 6 toss-up games, and if that's me, I'm thinking, that means we got a chance. Because plug in the 4, just for example, you could plug in the 4 favorable wins and just say, they're gonna win those games and say, so that's 6 wins right there. Put the 2 losses, that's 5, so you puts you at 6-5. You take half of the toss-up games, that puts you at 9 wins, which in the NFC, that gives you a chance going into week 18, being a wild card team. So 6 toss-up games is important in my opinion for Packers fans watching this video because it tells you that you got a chance.
Absolutely. And again, that's exactly what we're talking about. Those toss-up games are going to be the ones coming down to the wire. So we're going to break down these favorable, unfavorable, and toss-up games in a second. Let's keep this thing going. So there's 4 favorable games according to our Top Notch Sports model. And they are listed as these following games. The Denver game at Denver, right, coming off the bye week. The game against the New York Giants, which again is at New York. The game against Carolina, which is at Carolina. And the game against Chicago, which is going to be in Green Bay. So, Jackson, 4 favorable games according to the model, 3 of those being on the road. So, as favorable as they may look on paper, the model's saying even on the road, they feel like these are favorable games. And again, if everything goes right, you can mark these as wins, but on the road, it's tough, so we may have to take a closer look at this ourselves, and maybe we disagree with the model. But what are you thinking about these 4 favorable games? If they want to have a shot at the playoffs, the model is going to say these are 4 must-win games for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, look, in my opinion, I think these are, pretty, easy wins for the, I don't want to say easy, but these are some of the worst teams in the NFL, at least in my opinion. I'm talking about the Giants, the Panthers, and the Chicago Bears. So even though with those games being on the road potentially, I think, it does favor in the Packers' direction, just being how weak those teams are and where they are in the standings right now.
Yep. So again, these are 4 games that are going to be must wins according to the model. Let's keep this thing going. There are 2 unfavorable games according to the TNS model. These games are listed as the Kansas City game, which is going to be at Green Bay, and the game against Detroit. So, Jackson, what are you feeling with these 2 games?
Yeah, if you're looking over here at the schedule on the left, these two games are going to be right back to back off each other. Um, Look, Kansas City, they're perennial Super Bowl contenders every year. We've seen them. They win Super Bowls, so it's always going to be a tough game. Model thinks that one's unfavorable. And then Detroit Lions this year also looking like maybe they could be a true Super Bowl contender. So it is not shocking that the model thinks that game's unfavorable as well.
For sure. So again, these are two games that again now if Green Bay can pull one of these two off, it will definitely increase their playoff chances. But when you look at these two games, one in Detroit, one in Green Bay, the game in Detroit is going to be really, really tough, especially that it's in Detroit. And the other game that's against Kansas City in Green Bay, as much as Green Bay may be a home field advantage, right? The fans are loving it. Kansas City is one of the toughest football teams in the league. Going to be a very tough task for Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. And the 6 toss-up games. Let's break these down. These, by the Top Notch Sports model, are Minnesota, the LA Rams, Pittsburgh, the LA Chargers, Tampa Bay, and Minnesota. Jackson, when we look at these 6 games, these are the ones that are really going to come down to the wire here. These are the ones that are going to ultimately either help the Green Bay Packers make the playoffs or they're going to miss it because of these 6 games. When you look at these 6, how are you feeling?
Yeah, look, when I look at these 6 games, I guess the first thing I notice is that 4 of these games are going to be at Lambeau Field. So that is, big thing at least in my opinion. Lambeau fans are always rocking. Lambeau Field's always rocking. So that's going to be big time advantage for the Packers. And then looking at these games in general, these are going to be very tough games. They're going to be, games that, at least in my opinion, are probably going to go down in the fourth quarter. And it's going to be, decide whether the Packers make the playoffs. They're going to have to win at least half of these games, in my opinion.
For sure. And again, like you look at the Minnesota game, the first Minnesota game will be without Justin Jefferson. The second one, it could come down to whether or not Minnesota is fighting for a playoff spot. That could be a huge game. I mean, you end the year with 2 back-to-back, right? Minnesota, Chicago, 2 back-to-back divisional games that are going to be huge for the Green Bay Packers playoff chances, okay? And like you said, Jackson, in the beginning of the video, Carolina, Tampa Bay, and the New York Giants, those 3 games are, 3 games in a row that could be guinea games for Green Bay if they can take all 3. And if they take all 3, they're going to be on a hot streak going into those final 2 divisional games that could ultimately make or break their season. So now let's break down these games. We're going to start with the first 4: Denver, Minnesota, the LA Rams, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here we are, okay? So after the first, with 8 games remaining on the schedule, we have this team at 4-4. Jackson, break down on the bottom right corner of the screen these games and what we got them doing. Well, what the model has, what we have them doing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is what we have as top-notch sports analysts. We think the Denver game coming off the bye is going to be a W, and then going into playing the Minnesota Vikings at Lambeau Field, that one's going to be too close to call right now for us as analysts. So we came back to that one at the end. Los Angeles Rams, look, that's a very tough team right now. I think they're a very underrated team. LA Rams, we think that one's going to be an L. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, that was another one of those toss-up games that we have swinging towards the Green Bay Packers way. It's going to be a good road win for them in Pittsburgh. So going up to the predicted record right now, it's 4-4, but that is without the Minnesota game going into the equation with 8 games remaining.
Yeah, so look, again, like you mentioned, you win the Denver game, which is huge, okay? You go against Minnesota, it's too close to call. We're not doing that one yet. As Jackson mentioned, we'll do that one at the end. The LA Rams, one that, we feel like they may lose that one. It's in Green Bay, but Aaron Donald single-handedly can change the game, and that man's been doing it now for years. The one in Pittsburgh, we ultimately have them sealing that one in Pittsburgh, which is a huge win for this Green Bay Packers team. Now let's go in and look at the next 4. Next 4 games, Jackson, not looking so pretty. LA Chargers, Detroit, Kansas City, New York Giants. Give it away.
Yeah, well, this is a really tough 4-game stretch for the Packers. Starting off with the LA Chargers, which that game is too close for us to call right now. That game is going to be at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And then you're going to the Detroit Lions at Ford Field. And like we said, the model said it was an unfavorable game. Penciling an L there against Detroit. And then against the Kansas City Chiefs, another unfavorable game, not going the Packers' way as well. And then you go to the New York Giants at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, where the Giants aren't looking too great offensively. Good defense that the Packers have. We have the Packers beating that game against the New York Giants.
And again, that's a big must-win game. The model said so. We say so. They ultimately pull that one off. With 4 games remaining and 2 questionable, too close to call games, we have the team currently at 5-6 as a predicted record. Let's go into the final 4-game stretch and see what we got. Final 4 games: Tampa Bay, Carolina, Minnesota, Chicago. Jackson, go ahead.
Yeah, look, Tampa Bay, that was one of those toss-up games according to the model. At Lambeau Field, we have the Packers coming out with the W there. And then the Carolina Panthers was one of the favorable games that we have going the Packers' way as well, going on the road, playing the Panthers. Minnesota Vikings, we have them splitting the series against the Vikings, going up to Minnesota and losing the game there. And then closing out the game, this is going to be a huge, huge game to end the season. We have them getting the win against the Chicago Bears at home at Lambeau Field to end off their record at 8-7. This is without the Chargers games in the first Minnesota Vikings game into equation. I said they split the series with the Vikings. We don't know that yet. So 8-7 predicted record with 0 games remaining on the schedule besides the 2 games that we're going to come back to.
Yeah, so right now 8-7 with 2 too close to call games. Trying to end the season on a high note. We'll see. How do we have these 2 close to call games going? Well, let's find out right now. Here they are. Jackson, break them down. Minnesota and the LA Chargers.
Yeah, so like I kind of hinted at before, we had them splitting the series with the Minnesota Vikings, which is huge for the individual thing, the divisional records. And then the LA Chargers, look, if Brandon Staley can, get his act together a little bit, the Chargers on paper should be able to, go into Lambeau Field and get this win. At least that's what we came to an agreement as analysts. So with that being said, the record is going to be 9-8 with no more games remaining to predict.
There you go. So we currently have them at 9-8. Now let's go on and see what else we got left for you in store here. We have the final predicted record to be 9-8. With the absolute floor, now this is according to the model. The model says the absolute floor, if everything was to go wrong for this Green Bay Packers team, you would end the season at 6-11. The model projects you guys to finish with a record of 9-8 as well, and an absolute ceiling of 12-5. But the model is right on spot with us, also projecting a 9-8 record for the Green Bay Packers in the 2023 NFL season. So we're right on the money there. We're right on the money there. You see the floor, the absolute floor, and the absolute ceiling for the Green Bay Packers team. Let's continue. The current record for the Green Bay Packers is 2-3. We have them finishing 7-5 in the final 12 games with a final record of 9-8. Jackson, is there anything else you want to say to wrap up this video?
Yeah, look, Packers fans watching this video, I think, 9-8, if you guys finish 9-8, you're looking in, you're probably watching other games on, Saturday or Sunday, January 7th, hoping maybe you guys get a chance to get into the playoffs, which I think right now, looking in, that's exactly where you probably want to be. So the model thinks you're going to go 9-8, and we think you're going to go 9-8 as well, which in my opinion, I think you're going to have a chance to make a wild card push, with maybe a first round exit, in the future if you do make it in there.
Yeah, so we look at this here again. Look at the season record, man. You win, loss, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. I mean, it's a very streaky. You get on a hot streak, you get on a cold streak. You see 3 losses in a row, 3 wins in a row, 2 losses in a row, 2 wins in a row. Very streaky here, but with a team that's a little bit inconsistent right now and young, this is not a bad start from Matt LaFleur and this young Green Bay Packers team. So here's our final prediction. The Green Bay Packers finished with a 9-8 record, second in the NFC North, possibly making the wild card, but losing in the first round of the wild card in the playoffs. This is the current state of the Green Bay Packers. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We'll see you guys soon. Peace. We are
Built Better.
See you guys soon. Peace.
180. 180 set.